Tonight, you must sleep with both of us. That is the rule for anyone who buys this house." Those were the words spoken by the two giant Apache sisters to the new owner of the ranch. Boone Whitmore pulled his old horse up the final slope, catching sight of the silent wooden rooftop nestled in the valley, the ranch he had traded all his savings and his last shred of hope for. The desert wind swept through, carrying the scent of dry earth and a foreboding that Boone could not quite explain. He stepped onto the weathered porch, his hand resting on the door latch. The door creaked open with the sound of a too-late warning. Then he froze. In the dim light of the house, two Apache women stood shoulder to shoulder like warrior statues. Both were taller than him, with broad shoulders and muscles that looked carved from red stone. One had long black hair and eyes as sharp as a blade Sahiri. The other had deep auburn hair and forearms strung tight like a drawn bow Nyota. Neither moved. The air was so heavy, it felt like one more breath would splinter the wood. Sahiri took half a step forward, her voice low and steady, like a ceremonial drumbeat. "Tonight, you must sleep with both of us. That is the rule for anyone who buys this house." Boone felt his blood run in reverse. His throat went dry. His hand instinctively drifted to the grip of his revolver. He did not know if this was a trap, a threat, or the beginning of a much darker tale. Only one thing was certain. He had not bought a ranch. He had stepped into a storm. Boone Whitmore stood frozen for a few seconds, his heart pounding like the sound of hooves in the night. He had thought he was buying a rundown ranch. He had no idea he was buying a breathing nightmare. Boone took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "What Rula are you talking about?" Nyota, the red-haired one, clearly the more fiery, pointed to the wooden table. A piece of animal hide was laid out neatly on top, the handwriting crude but unmistakable. "The last owner left it," she said. Her lips pressed tight with a mix of anger and shame. Boone stepped closer. The towering shadows of the two Apache sisters loomed over his back like canyon walls. He picked up the hide. Just reading the first line made his knees weaken. Agreement between Marcus Vance and two female laborers. Marcus Vance. That name bled through his thoughts like ink and water. The man who had sold him this ranch. Boone flipped to the next page. Each word sent a deeper chill down his spine. The land buyer must continue to take care of the two Apache sisters living in the house. Must share home and body as needed. Must not expel them, as they are part of the property. A contract soaked in filth. He threw the hide back on the table. "What kind of sick joke is this?" Sahiri did not react. She simply stood there with an empty stare, the stare of someone who had endured too much for too long. "Marcus's law is not our law," Sahiri said quietly. "But we had nothing else left to hold on to." Boone looked around the house. A dining table with one leg broken, a cold, dead fireplace, tools and furniture scattered and broken, and in the corner of the room, black scratch marks on the floor, like something heavy had been dragged. A feeling welled up in his chest, one he knew too well. The feeling of someone who had been thrown into the mud by life. Boone asked gently, "What did Marcus do to you?" No answer came at first. Then Nyota snapped. "He lived with us. Promised we would build this ranch together. Promised he would take care of our family." Her shoulders trembled. "Then he worked us from dawn until midnight. Building fences, digging wells, clearing land, hunting game. Everything," Sahiri added, her voice heavy as iron. "When the ranch finally started to come together, he sold it, took the money, and vanished." The silence that followed felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Nyota stared directly at Boone, her dark eyes red with the tears she was holding back. "We thought you were someone Marcus hired to continue the deal." Boone stood still. For the first time since stepping into the house, the two women no longer looked like warriors. They looked like two people who had been left behind, worn down, wounded, and desperate enough to cling to a filthy piece of hide. Boone drew a breath. His eyes softened. "Listen," he said, his voice slow and steady as hardwood. "I do not do that. I do not touch anyone. And I do not follow the rules of Marcus Vance." The sisters looked at him, a mix of suspicion and hope in their eyes. Boone placed both hands on the wooden table and spoke each word clearly. "From now on, if you choose to stay here, everything follows my rules. No one gets forced. No one belongs to anyone. And no one will ever kneel under Marcus's shadow again." For the first time, Sahiri's stare seemed to flicker, as if a small storm inside her had just begun to settle. Boone Whitmore's words dropped into the old wooden house like a quiet spark, small, but strong enough to shake the heavy air that had hung there for far too long. The two Apache women did not believe him right away. But their eyes that had grown used to violence and betrayal, had begun to waver. Sahiri was the first to speak. Her voice was low, like a drum summoning the wind. "No white man has ever said those words to us." Boone leaned back against the table, his hands trembling slightly from the weight of the story that had begun to unfold. "I am not Marcus," he said slowly, "but I need to understand everything before we decide anything." A long silence followed. The wind howled at the door, slipping through the cracks in the wall and making the oil lamp flicker like it was about to die. Then Nyota, the fiercer of the two, began to speak. "My sister and I were orphaned young. Our tribe was driven from our land, and we drifted south. When we met Marcus, he said he needed strong people to build a ranch. He promised fair pay. He said he respected the Apache." She let out a bitter laugh, a sound more painful than crying. "We believed him." Sahiri clenched her fists, the veins in her arms standing out like taut ropes. "At first, he really was kind, gave us separate rooms, gave us food, gave us a promise that this would be home." Her voice grew quiet, almost swallowed by the shadows. "Then, when things started to get better, he began to change." Boone stayed silent, his heart pulling tight like something was being dragged through it. Nyota picked up the story, her voice now sharp as a blade carving stone. "He wanted us to pay him back. He twisted his promise into a contract, said if we did not agree, he would throw us off the land. And by then, there was nowhere else that would take Apache women like us." She took a long breath, her eyes red but dry. "We worked ourselves to the bone, built every foot of fence, dug every bucket of dirt, hauled every drop of water. And him," Nyota clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white, "he gambled in town and brought his debts back here." Boone looked around the room, the bruise on Sahiri's arm, the cracks in the wall, the worn tools down to the handle. Everything matched the story. It was not the two Apache warrior women who had broken this ranch. It was Marcus. Sahiri spoke quietly. "When he sold the land, we thought he would keep his word, share the profit with us." She shook her head, but he took it all, disappeared into the night. Left behind that filthy piece of hide, to turn us into a burden for whoever bought this place. Boone felt his throat tighten, not from anger at Marcus, but because he saw something. He recognized people thrown off a cliff by someone they had once trusted. He spoke softly, but with solid conviction. "You do not deserve to live under that law, and you sure as hell do not deserve to be treated like property." The sisters looked at him. For the first time, there was no suspicion, only pain, exhaustion, and a faint, flickering hope, like the oil lamp beside them. Nyota asked, her voice on the edge of breaking. "Then, what do we do, Boone Whitmore?" Boone looked at the two tall, strong women who now stood shattered before him. "We start over," he said, low and firm. "No contracts forced on anyone. Just this land. And the three of us, if you are willing." And in that moment, inside a broken wooden house beneath a trembling oil lamp, something truly changed. The desert wind shifted, sweeping across the porch with a whisper of dust and an eerie silence. Boone Whitmore looked at the two Apache sisters standing before him, women nearly as tall as the doorway, with shoulders broader than most men he had ever known. And yet, in their eyes now, there was only pain. Boone laid Marcus's hide contract back on the table, then pushed it aside like someone clearing a stone out of their path. "His contract means nothing now," he said, his voice steady. "All we have between us is this, mutual respect and a willingness to work together." Sahiri looked at him for a long moment. "You do not know how strong we are," she said. "We can haul whole logs, carry grain sacks twice the weight of the town's men, but no one ever taught us how to start over." Boone answered gently, "I do not know either. But I do know how to begin a job. One step at a time." Nyota, the quicker, more fiery one, crossed her arms, her muscles tight like ropes drawn to the edge. "What do you gain by helping us? This land is drying out. The granary is empty. The debt is so bad even the townfolk stay away." "Not for gain," Boone replied, "because we are more alike than you think. I was cheated too, lost everything, and had to start again from nothing." Nyota blinked. She was not used to hearing men speak such bare truth. Sahiri lowered her head, as if accepting something heavier than her anger at Marcus. Boone Whitmore, if we stay here under this new agreement, will you leave us too? That question cut deep not because she doubted him, but because for too many years, all they had known was the fear of being abandoned. Boone did not answer with words right away. He walked over to the door and opened it, gesturing out toward the vast prairie soaked in the copper glow of the dying Sunday. This land needs all three of us, he said. No one can carry it alone. Then he turned back, looking directly at the two towering women. You are the strongest people I have ever met, but no matter how strong you are, everyone needs a place to belong. Those words brought silence to the entire house. Sahiri looked over at Nyota, as if searching for shared understanding. Nyota gave a small nod. Just a nod. But it carried the surrender of a heart that had been holding too much for too long. Sahiri shifted her stance and stepped closer to Boone, nearly a head taller than him. Her voice dropped lower, warmer than the first time they met. Then from this moment on, we will follow the law of Boone Whitmore, Nyota added. Her voice still sharp, but softer now. Not because we are forced to, but because this is the first time we get to choose. Boone felt the shift clearly, like the first storm winds calming after a long drought. It was not a victory. It was a handshake between three people who had all been thrown to the bottom, now trying to build something decent. And in that exact moment, a new shape of hope was planted on this dying ranch. Thank you for being here with me. Let us know where you are watching from. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel to support what I do. I just hope that wherever you are listening from, you are safe and happy. The first morning on the new ranch looked no different than a battlefield left behind after a long siege. A thin mist clung to broken fences, and the deep footprints of the two Apache sisters marked the dirt like scars. Boone Whitmore stood in the yard, hands on his hips, surveying the wreckage in front of him. Beside him, Sahiri and Nyota stepped out of the house like living statues, muscles flexing under the early light, their breath white as smoke. Where do we begin? Sahiri asked. Boone pointed to the collapsed horse stable. Over there. Without a proper stable, we cannot keep the new herd. The sisters gave a small nod. No complaints. No hesitation. They dove into the work like people used to surviving through sweat. Sahiri turned and lifted a heavy wooden beam one Boone was sure would take at least 3 town men to move. Her broad shoulders strained with power, each muscle moving like a wild creature tamed by necessity. Standing beside her, Boone felt himself shrink to half his size, but not with shame. Sahiri's strength was not for show, it was for survival. Nyota was different. She was quick, agile like a mountain cougar. Every time Boone turned around to look for a hammer or a coil of rope, she was already there, handing him exactly what he needed, exactly when he needed it, as if reading his mind. At one point, Boone chuckled. Can you see the future or something? Nyota shrugged, smirking. Work with men long enough. You learn when they are about to mess things up. Boone blushed. Not from the teasing, but because that smile made his heart beat faster than usual. By noon, the three of them sat on the porch steps, eating cornbread hard as stone and yet strangely delicious, flavored by sweat and wind. Nyota took a drink from the water skin, set it down, and asked, Mr. Whitmore, why are you really helping us? It is not because of any law. Boone looked into her sharp black eyes, paused a few seconds, then said, because everyone deserves a fair chance. The words were simple but honest, and they made Sahiri freeze for a moment. She looked at Boone longer than she needed to. For the first time, there was no suspicion, no guarded wall, only a deep acknowledgement. By late afternoon, they had finished half the stable roof. Nyota climbed onto the beam, steadying a large plank with just one arm while Boone nailed it in place. The wind blew her hair across his face, carrying the scent of smoke, sun, and a life that had known nothing but struggle. When she climbed down, Nyota slipped slightly. Boone reached out and caught her. Her body was hard as steel, but it trembled just a little at his touch. That tremble was not fear. It was the feeling of being held, without anyone asking for something in return. For a moment, they stood closer than they needed to. Sahiri saw it from a distance. Instead of jealousy or doubt, she smiled a soft smile, like someone seeing hope for the first time in years. The long day ended in a copper sunset, with 3 tall shadows standing side by side in a field of dust. No longer a new owner and 2 left-behind souls. They looked like a team, and from the deepest corner of that dry, broken land, a fragile new sprout of what could be called a home had just begun to grow. That afternoon, clouds gathered into thick patches like black velvet, and the wind stopped completely as if the entire valley was holding its breath. Boone, Sahiri, and Nyota were loading the last planks onto the stable roof when Boone's horse suddenly let out a long, uneasy whinny. Sahiri turned instantly, eyes sharp as an axe blade. Someone's coming. Boone wiped his hands and looked down the dirt road leading into the ranch. In the distance, a cloud of dust was rising. A group of 5 or 6 riders was heading their way slow, deliberate. These were not strangers just passing through. No, that dust carried the scent of trouble. Nyota jumped down from the roof, landing as lightly as a wildcat, her muscles rippling under sun-darkened skin. "Is it them?" she asked, voice low. Boone squinted to see more clearly. As the lead rider came into view, a heavy weight pressed against his chest. Marcus Vance, the man who sold him this ranch, the man who had cornered the 2 Apache sisters, the man Boone had hoped he would never see again. Marcus rode to the edge of the yard, wearing a crooked grin like someone who had just sniffed out easy spoils. The men behind him kept their hands close to their guns a little too ready. "Well, well," Marcus drawled. "This place looks better than it did the last time I stood here." Boone clenched his fists but kept his voice steady. "What do you want?" Marcus glanced over at Sahiri and Nyota, 2 towering women now standing firmly at Boone's side. Their presence like carved pillars that any man would think twice about challenging. His grin turned bitter. "Just as I thought. They are still here." Nyota stepped forward. Just one step, but the earth beneath her foot sank half an inch. "Do not say our names with that voice," she growled. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I have every right. I used to own this ranch. I used to own them." Those words cracked the air. Sahiri's fists whitened with pressure. Nyota looked like a drawn bow about to snap. Boone stepped forward, standing between them. "No one belongs to you anymore, Marcus." Marcus let out a loud, hollow laugh, the kind of laugh men use when they think nothing can touch them. "You think a few coins give you that, right? Mr. Boone, I am here to take back what is mine." "What part?" Boone asked, his voice cold as shattered stone. "This ranch," Marcus said plainly. "You paid for the land, but the living property," his eyes locked on the Apache sisters, "still belongs to me." Sahiri stepped forward, voice deep as a ceremonial drumbeat. "Try us." Marcus did not back down. He gave a small nod. All 5 men behind him placed their hands on their guns. The valley fell silent, like the world holding its breath before the storm breaks. Boone placed his hand on the grip of his Colt. Unafraid. He knew what was coming. He knew Marcus did not just want land. He wanted control again, wanted to see the 2 Apache sisters kneel like they once had. No, that would never happen again, not today. Sahiri whispered, "Boone, do not fight for us." Boone replied softly, "I am not fighting for you." He gripped his revolver tighter. "I am fighting for justice." For the first time all afternoon, a cold wind swept through the valley. The storm had officially begun. The wind picked up, sweeping dry dust into spirals in front of the house as if drawing a line of life and death into the earth. Marcus remained on horseback, smirking. "I will say this one last time. Step aside, Boone. This is not your business." Boone stood tall, eyes cold but steady. "Then you had better prepare your last words, because I am not standing down." Marcus sneered and gave a small signal. 2 of his gunmen moved out, forming a wide arc trying to surround them. What they did not expect was that standing in front of them was not just one lean Boone Whitmore, but 2 towering Apache warrior women. Sahiri stood on Boone's left, shoulders as broad as a grown man's. Black hair tied back, eyes sharp as a blade honed to its final edge. Nyota stood on his right, fast and fierce, like a wildfire, her long legs bent slightly, the stance of a predator ready to strike. Marcus barked, "Take down the women first. We will deal with Boone after." The gunman on the left reached for his pistol, but Sahiri was faster. She surged forward just 3 long strides to close the entire yard. Her punch, as massive and solid as a timber beam, drove straight into the man's chest. A crack echoed. He flew backward off his saddle, landing in the dirt, writhing. Nyota let out a low growl. She lunged right, sliding low like a cat over sand, grabbing the ankle of the second man. He toppled over, his gun flying into the air. She caught it between two fingers and spun, slamming the butt into his temple. Boone drew his Colt. His voice dropped low. "Stop this, Marcus." But Marcus had already drawn his gun, hands shaking not from fear, but from rage. "I lost everything because of those two women. I will not let them have a new life." The hammer clicked. Boone raised his gun, but Marcus aimed, not at him, but at Sahiri. In that instant, time shrank into a single thread. Nyota shouted, "Sister!" Boone did not think, did not hesitate. He threw himself into Sahiri, pushing her hard to the side. The gunshot cracked. Smoke burst from the barrel like the breath of a demon. Boone staggered. The bullet only grazed his coat, but the fall knocked him out of position and down into the thin dust. Marcus cursed, raising his aim again. But this time, Sahiri stood up. Not a tremble in her. She walked straight toward Marcus, eyes black and deep like a moonless night. "You have taken too much from us," she said, her voice low as falling stone. "Right now we take it back." She grabbed Marcus by the collar just as he pulled the trigger. The shot rang out but went wide, thrown off by her grip. Nyota leapt in. In 2 heartbeats, Marcus was torn from his horse, his gunman scattered, his face planted into the dirt. Boone rose to his feet, breathing hard, watching the 2 Apache sisters pin the man who had wrecked their lives. Sahiri hauled Marcus up and tossed him toward Boone. "You decide," she said. "If you let him live, he will never come back." Boone looked at Marcus trembling, filthy, like a cornered animal dragged from its hole. He turned his Colt, popped out the spent shell, and said, voice hoarse but firm, "Turn him over to the town. The law will handle the rest." Sahiri and Nyota looked at him, not with ordinary gratitude, but with something deeper, a light found only in those who are seeing true kindness for the first time in their lives. 6 months passed. From what was once a crumbling ranch, a new life had risen. Straight fences now ran along the hills. The horse stable had been rebuilt with the sturdiest wood in the valley. The granary no longer howled with the wind through holes, but echoed with the daily thud of sacks being stacked, full of grain. But the most profound change was the rhythm of the house. Sahiri, the older sister, now stood out front every morning, watching over the horses with the patience of someone who had spent half her life carrying more than her share. Her shoulders were strong as beams, but her eyes had softened, rarely sharp now, unlike the first day Boone met her. Nyota was in the kitchen, barefoot on the wooden floor, flipping corn cakes while giggling at Boone's awkward jokes. She was still fast, still fiery, but now her fire gave off warmth. No longer a flame of defense, but the hearth of a home. And Boone was fixing the oil lamp on the porch, hands moving with ease, his face relaxed in a way it had not been for years, finally learning what peace felt like. Just like that, 3 people each carrying wounds of their own lived together, breathed together, as if they had belonged to each other long before they ever met. One evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The golden light rested gently on their shoulders, turning Sahiri and Nyota's muscles into bronze like living statues carved from the earth. Boone spoke slowly. "The day I came here, I thought I had bought a nightmare." Sahiri did not look at him. She simply said, low enough for all 3 to hear, "And we thought God had sent another man to trample what was left of our lives." Nyota let out a soft laugh and leaned her head on Boone's shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Turns out we were all wrong." Boone looked at the 2 Apache sisters, the strongest women he had ever known, strong in body, stronger in heart. "No," he said, "we were not wrong. We just arrived at the right time." The evening breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of warm earth and corn roasting in the kitchen. No one said anything else. They did not need to. Some kinds of love are born in silence, in moments when 3 hearts quietly agree that no matter how wide the world is, all they truly need is one thing: a home built not of wood, but of trust and kindness. As night fell, Boone stood and lit a fire out in the yard. Sahiri brought more wood. Nyota carried a thick blanket for all 3 of them. 3 shadows, 1 lonely man and 2 Apache warrior women, their bodies forged like the wild strength of the mountains, sat close by the fire. Boone looked at them, the flames dancing in his eyes. "This," he whispered, "is our home." And from that night on, none of them were ever alone again. Dear friend, there are wounds you cannot see with your eyes, only hear in the way someone goes quiet. And there are hands that may not be strong, but still gentle enough to touch the deepest pain without breaking it further. In the Wild West, a land of dust storms and betrayal, kindness remains the one thing that never runs dry. It does not shout. It simply stands there, like a small flame, keeping a tired heart warm, because sometimes a single act of kindness is enough to heal an entire life. In the end, I truly hope that you, wherever you are, will always find happiness and peace. I love you, the cherished audience of Wild West storytelling. Tell me what you felt about this story. Leave a comment below. Tap 1 if you enjoyed this journey. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful tale from the wild frontier.